In 1937, Napoleon Hill documented 267 people who rebuilt fortunes after losing everything. All reported the same pattern in the 90 days before the turnaround. They affirmed out loud every day that the outcome had already happened, with specific details of amount and date, while their banks recorded negative balances. The brain of each one of them began to see invisible opportunities 3 weeks before any external evidence appeared. It wasn't luck, it wasn't chance. It was a mechanism that Napoleon Hill spent 20 years documenting, and that modern neuroscience confirmed in the laboratory. This mechanism has a name, and when you understand how it works, you no longer need to wait for the door to appear. Between 1908 and 1928, Napoleon Hill interviewed 500 business leaders, industrialists, and inventors in the United States. Andrew Carnegie challenged him to discover what separated those who rebuilt empires from those who sank at the first crisis. Hill expected to find strategies, contacts, capital. He found something completely different. He realized that the men who came back from financial collapse didn't wait for recovery to arrive. They operated as if it had already arrived. They spoke about their businesses in the present, not the future. They signed contracts as if they had cash. They hired teams before they could pay the first payroll. And most disturbing, they described the final outcome with sensory precision: room temperature, paper texture, sound of the partner's voice. Weeks before any of these things existed. Hill called this applied faith, not religious faith, not hope. Faith as a surgical act. You affirm the outcome as accomplished fact and let your nervous system reorganize the perception of risk, opportunity, and time. The brain stops asking if it's possible. It starts looking for where it's already happening. And when he analyzed the data, he discovered that the transformation always began in the same place. Not in the bank account, not in the signed contract. It began in the way these people operated mentally 3 weeks before any external evidence changed. 267 people, all documented by Napoleon Hill between 1934 and 1937. All had lost everything: failed businesses, accumulated debts, destroyed reputation, and all rebuilt complete fortunes in less than 3 years. The pattern was disturbing. 90 days before the first external evidence of recovery, before the first signed contract, before the first customer returned, before the first cent entered the account, these people began to affirm out loud that the outcome had already happened. Not as desire, not as hope, as fact. One of them was a textile manufacturer in Detroit. Lost the factory in 1932, owed $83,000. No bank would talk. No supplier would sell on credit. He began to say out loud every day upon waking, "My factory generates $120,000 per year and is debt-free." Not future, present. He described the smell of fresh paint on the renovated walls, the sound of machines running 2 shifts, the texture of the paper of the contract with the new distributor. He wrote the distributor's name before knowing who it would be. He wrote the exact amount of the first shipment. He wrote the delivery date. 3 weeks later, he recognized an opportunity that had been in front of him for months. an abandoned warehouse whose owner wanted to rent for symbolic value just to not leave it empty. He signed the contract the same day, without being able to pay the first month, operating as if the money were already guaranteed. And 2 days later, a former customer called offering an order that would cover 4 months of rent. Hill documented this, not as anecdote, as pattern. He interviewed each of the 267 people, asked for dates, asked for numbers, asked for details, and discovered that all began to see invisible opportunities between 3 and 5 weeks after they started affirming the outcome as accomplished fact. Not 3 months, not 6 months, 3 weeks. The brain of each one of them stopped filtering reality as "I don't have it yet," and started filtering as "Where is this already happening?" The door didn't appear. The door was always there. What changed was the recognition system. Say this out loud. Faith doesn't attract the outcome. Faith reorganizes perception so you recognize where the outcome is already available. When Napoleon Hill cross-referenced the data, he found something even more disturbing. The 267 people didn't just affirm the outcome. They acted as if the outcome were already real. On the same day as the affirmation, they made a physical decision that would only make sense if the outcome already existed. The manufacturer signed the warehouse contract. Another hired a salesman before having a product to sell. Another renovated the office with money he didn't have. Absurd decisions. If you operate mentally in "not yet," obvious decisions. If you operate mentally in "it's already real," and the brain cannot sustain two realities at the same time. When you affirm and act as if the outcome already existed, the nervous system stops interpreting that as risk. It starts interpreting it as execution of something already underway. The financial result took months to appear, but the neural reorganization happened in weeks. Hill measured this. He asked each person to record when they started to see opportunities that previously passed invisible. The average was 21 days. 21 days between the first affirmation and the first recognized opportunity. This isn't spirituality. It's mechanics of perception. Your brain filters 99% of the reality around you because it cannot process everything at the same time. It chooses what to show based on what you've defined as real or possible. When you operate as if something were already real, the filter changes. It stops hiding the doors. And Napoleon Hill proved this with 267 documented cases. Names, dates, amounts, not theory, evidence. What you just heard is not motivational theory. It's documented mechanism. And what comes now goes deeper. I'm going to show you exactly what these people did in the first 4 hours after affirming, and how that reorganized the brain before any result appeared. If you want to understand the complete method, subscribe to the channel now, because each block from here forward delivers a piece you won't find anywhere else. Popular belief says that faith is waiting with confidence, maintaining positive thinking, visualizing the outcome, and letting the universe act. Millions of people repeat affirmations every day, write down goals, create vision boards, meditate on abundance, and wait for transformation to come from outside in. It makes sense to believe this. The idea that thinking right attracts the right result is emotionally comforting. It was validated by decades of motivational literature, and it has a real basis. Visualization works. Affirmation works. The problem isn't the tool. The problem is what you do after affirming. Popular belief teaches that you affirm, visualize, feel the emotion of the result. And then you wait. You trust. You maintain high frequency. You act only when the opportunity appears. And while the opportunity doesn't appear, you keep affirming, keep visualizing, keep waiting for the universe to reorganize external reality, to deliver what you asked for. This sounds spiritual, sounds elevated, and millions of people truly believe they're doing everything right because the promise is clear. Think like rich, feel like rich, and wealth will come to you. Think like healthy, feel like healthy, and healing will come to you. The mistake isn't in those who believe. The mistake is in what was taught as faith. Because Napoleon Hill studied these same people, those who affirmed, visualized, felt, and didn't move from their place. He compared them with the 267 who rebuilt fortunes, and he found the difference. Those who stayed stuck, affirmed, and waited. Those who rebuilt fortunes, affirmed, and acted. And the action didn't come after the opportunity appeared. The action came on the same day as the affirmation. Before any external evidence changed, physical action, concrete. That would only make sense if the result were already real. This completely inverts the logic. Popular belief says, affirm the result, wait for the door to appear, cross when it opens. Napoleon Hill documented the opposite. Affirm the result, act as if the door were already open, and your brain will recognize where it has always been. The difference isn't in the thought. It's in the immediate behavior that comes after the thought. A study from New York University in 2018 followed 8,000 people who used positive affirmations for 6 months. The objective was to measure impact on income, relationships, and career. 71% didn't alter any metric in a measurable way. They remained in the same income bracket, same relationships, same career. 29% had measurable results. And when researchers investigated what this group did differently, they found the pattern. They didn't just affirm. After affirming, they wrote on paper, if this were already real, what would be my next action in the next 4 hours? And they executed that action before sleeping, every day, without exception. They didn't wait for opportunity. They didn't wait to feel like it. They didn't wait for a sign from the universe. They affirmed. They defined the action. They executed. And the brain began to interpret that as execution of something underway, not as preparation for something future. The faith that transforms doesn't wait. It reorganizes immediate behavior. Popular belief is wrong, not because affirmation doesn't work. It's wrong because it taught that affirmation alone is sufficient. Napoleon Hill proved it isn't. Affirmation without immediate physical action is a letter that was never sent. Thought points to the destination. Behavior builds the path. And most people who believe in the law of attraction are stuck exactly there. Affirming with precision, visualizing with intensity, feeling with truth, and waiting for the result to come to them, while the brain continues filtering reality as, I still don't have it, because the neural filter doesn't change by what you think. It changes by what you do. That's exactly why I created the Mental Reprogramming Planner, a practical 21-day system based on neuroscience and Napoleon Hill's principles to eliminate procrastination, build real discipline, and reprogram the mind for high performance. You'll learn to translate affirmation into immediate physical action, the same pattern the 267 people applied. The link is in the pinned comment of this video. The belief that faith means waiting confidently crumbles when you look at the documented cases, not because faith doesn't work, but because the faith Napoleon Hill recorded has nothing to do with waiting. Andrew Carnegie applied this in 1892. His steel company was 60 days from bankruptcy. Suppliers cut credit. Banks refused loans. The following month's payroll had no coverage, and Carnegie didn't wait for the situation to improve. He affirmed in writing that the company was worth $25 million, not as a goal, as a fact. And that same day, without having cash, without having proof of value, he sold minority shares to 11 investors, as if the company were already worth that. He operated as an empire owner, not as a debtor. And the investors bought because he didn't ask for help, didn't ask for rescue. He offered participation in something he treated as if it were already solid. His behavior reorganized the investors' risk perception. They didn't buy the company's present. They bought the reality Carnegie was already operating in mentally. This wasn't optimism. It was perception surgery. Henry Ford did the same in 1914. He announced he would double the salary of all Ford Motor Company workers, from $2.50 per day to $5, without having cash to cover the expanded payroll for 90 days, without having guarantee that productivity would rise enough to justify the cost. He affirmed that productivity would double, and acted as if it had already doubled. He reorganized shifts, hired supervisors, bought machines, everything before having the numbers, operating as if the result were already active. And in 8 weeks, productivity rose 47%, not because the workers worked harder, but because Ford reorganized the system, operating in the mental reality that productivity had already doubled. His behavior forced the structure to adapt. Napoleon Hill was present when Ford explained this. He asked, "What if it hadn't worked?" Ford answered, "If I had operated as if it wouldn't work, I would never have reorganized anything. Failure would have been guaranteed." This is the opposite of waiting confidently. Waiting confidently means, I believe it will work, so I'll maintain positive thinking until evidence appears. Operating as if it were already real means, I treat the result as an accomplished fact and let my behavior reorganize everything around it to make it inevitable. The difference is surgical. In the first case, you wait for reality to change. In the second, you force reality to adapt to the behavior you've already assumed. And the brain can't fake this. It's useless to try to act as if. Either you truly operate in that mental reality, or the nervous system detects the incongruence and paralyzes. That's why Napoleon Hill insisted the affirmation must be so specific, so detailed, so sensory, that the brain cannot distinguish between memory and projection. When Carnegie affirmed the company was worth $25 million, he described the room where he would sign the contract, described the color of the pen, described the sound of the investor's voice agreeing. And when he arrived at the real meeting, his mind had already lived that. It wasn't new. It was execution of something he already knew would happen. This deactivates fear, because fear is a response to something unknown. If the brain has already lived it in sensory detail, it treats it as known. And known doesn't trigger paralysis. Popular belief fails exactly there. It teaches generic affirmation. I am prosperous. I am abundant. I deserve wealth. The brain hears this and cannot build a concrete image. It has no texture, no sound, no temperature, and without concrete sensation, there's no neural reorganization. Napoleon Hill taught affirmation with an address. Not, I am rich, but I have $50,000 deposited in the Central Bank of Chicago in account number such and such, and I will use them to open the factory on Michigan Street number such and such. Date, amount, place, name, and after the affirmation, physical action that would only make sense if that were already real. Open the bank account, visit the property, sign the lease contract before having the money. This isn't madness, it's forced reprogramming of the perception filter. You cannot see a door your brain classifies as impossible. But when you act as if the door were already open, the brain reclassifies, and the door that was invisible 3 weeks ago appears in front. Say this out loud. Affirmation without action is just a letter that was never sent. Popular belief isn't wrong in believing in faith. It's wrong in believing faith is a passive mental state. Napoleon Hill documented the opposite. Faith is an active behavioral decision. You don't wait to believe. You act until the brain is forced to believe. Now answer in the comments, have you ever affirmed something with such conviction that you started acting differently before any proof appeared? Tell us what the affirmation was and what physical action you took that same day. Because what comes next is the exact mechanism Napoleon Hill documented in those 267 people. And you need to see how they translated faith into physical decision in the first 4 hours. Napoleon Hill called this applied faith in Chapter 3 of Think and Grow Rich, and he was surgical in the definition. Faith is not passive belief. Faith is the act of operating mentally as if the outcome already existed, and translating that operation into immediate physical decision, not future, present. He explained that the human brain does not distinguish between lived reality and reality affirmed with sensory precision. When you describe the outcome with details of temperature, sound, texture, smell, and then execute a physical action aligned with that description, the prefrontal cortex reorganizes the perception of risk and opportunity as if that future were already in progress. This is not metaphor. It is neural mechanics. Your brain filters external reality based on what it classifies as possible or impossible. That filter is called the reticular activating system. It processes 11 million bits of information per second coming from your senses and lets only 40 bits through to consciousness. The rest is discarded. How does it choose what passes? Based on what you have defined as real. If you operate mentally as someone who does not yet have income of $10,000 per month, the reticular activating system filters all opportunities that would require income of $10,000 to be recognized, not because they do not exist, but because you have not signaled to the brain that this is real or possible for you. When Carnegie affirmed that the company was worth $25 million and sold a stake the same day, He forced the reticular activating system to reclassify company worth 25 million from impossible to in progress. And the brain began to show what it previously hid. Investors who had always been available, contracts that had always been possible, opportunities that had always existed, but which he did not recognize because he operated mentally as a debtor. The door did not appear. The door was always there. The filter changed. This explains why Napoleon Hill's 267 people began to see opportunities 3 weeks after they started affirming, not because the universe delivered, but because the brain stopped hiding. And modern neuroscience confirmed this. A study at the University of California in 2015 used functional magnetic resonance imaging to measure brain activity of people who affirmed goals. They divided into 2 groups. Group 1 affirmed the goal and visualized the final outcome. Group 2 affirmed the goal, visualized the final outcome, and then described on paper the first physical action they would take in the next 4 hours as if the outcome were already real, and executed the action. 17 days later, they measured again. Group 1 showed no significant change in prefrontal cortex activity. Group 2 showed increased activity in the region responsible for pattern recognition and decision-making. The brain had begun to search for where that reality was already available. Not positive thinking. Reorganization of perception. Say this out loud. Faith reserves the place. The plan builds the house. This changes everything. Faith is not believing something will happen. Faith is operating as if it had already happened and letting behavior reorganize reality around you. Popular belief was looking in the wrong place. The power is not in attracting the outcome. The power is in forcing your nervous system to interpret the present as if the future were already active. When you act as if, the brain stops filtering the doors. It recognizes them. Edwin Barnes applied this when he went to Thomas Edison in 1905. He had no money, no contact, no training, but he affirmed he would be Edison's partner, not future, present. I am Thomas Edison's partner. And he went to the laboratory uninvited, asked for any job, any. Edison hired him as a janitor. Minimum wage, no promise. And Barnes operated as a partner from day one. Listened to meetings, studied patents, offered ideas without being asked. Partner behavior, not janitor. 3 years later, Edison called him to manage the sale of a new product, the dictation machine. Barnes turned that into the company's largest distribution contract. And Edison made him an official partner. The door was always there. Barnes forced his brain, and Edison's, to recognize it. This is applied faith. You do not wait for reality to change. You change the filter that decides what reality will show you, and the filter changes when you accede as if the outcome were already inevitable. From now on, you no longer look at faith as belief in something that will come. You look at faith as a decision to operate in a mental reality where the outcome already exists, and let your behavior force the external world to adapt. Napoleon Hill summarized it in one sentence. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. But the key word is not conceive. It is believe. And believe, in his context, is not hope. It is operating as if it were fact. Aligned behavior, immediate decision, action before evidence. When you do this, the brain has no choice. It reclassifies, and what was invisible 3 weeks ago appears in front of you as if it had always been there, because it always was. You just did not operate at the mental frequency that allowed recognition. Napoleon Hill documented that the 267 people who rebuilt fortunes started exactly like this: affirming as fact, acting as proof, and 3 weeks later, recognizing doors that had always been open. But he found something even more disturbing when he cross-referenced the data. 93% of these people reported a specific moment of physical decision they made on the same day as the first affirmation that did not make logical sense at that moment, but which revealed itself as the central piece of the reconstruction months later. A decision that seemed absurd, but which was only made because they operated as if the outcome were already real. How many doors have you already passed without recognizing? Because you still operated as someone who waits, not as someone who has already arrived. The faith that opens invisible doors is not the faith you learned. It is not hope. It is not passive trust. It is not visualization without execution. The faith that Napoleon Hill documented and that 267 people used to rebuild fortunes from zero is perception surgery. You affirm the outcome as accomplished fact, with date, with value, with name, with texture. You describe the temperature of the room where you will sign the contract, the sound of the voice of the person who will agree, the color of the pen, the smell of the paper, concrete sensory detail that forces the brain to treat it as memory, not as projection. And then, on the same day, before sleeping, you execute one physical action that would only make sense if that outcome were already real. You do not wait for the door to appear. You act as if the door were already open and force the reticular activating system to reclassify what is possible for you. 3 weeks. That is the average time that Napoleon Hill documented between the first affirmation with physical action and the moment when the person began to recognize opportunities that previously passed invisible. Not 3 months, not 6 months, 21 days for the neural filter to change. You are no longer someone who waits confident that the universe will deliver. You are someone who operates as if the outcome already existed and lets behavior reorganize reality around. You do not attract the door. You force your brain to recognize where it always was. This is not empty spirituality. It is applied neural mechanics. Andrew Carnegie operated like this. Henry Ford operated like this. Edwin Barnes operated like this. And 267 people documented by Napoleon Hill operated like this. All rebuilt fortunes. All started without external evidence. All affirmed as fact and acted as proof. And the brain has no defense against this. When you act as if, it is forced to reclassify. And what was invisible appears. Say this out loud now. I operate as if the outcome already existed and let my behavior reorganize reality around. Now take a sheet. Write the outcome you want as if it had already happened. Specific date, specific value, name of who is involved, place where it will happen. Write in present tense. Not I will have, I have. Then answer, if this were already real, what would be my next decision in the next 4 hours? write the answer. And execute before sleeping today. It does not matter if it does not make sense. It does not matter if it seems absurd. The neural filter does not change because you thought differently. It changes because you acted differently. And when you act as if the outcome were already inevitable, the brain stops hiding the doors. It shows them. The faith that Napoleon Hill taught does not ask the universe to change. It forces you to change the filter that decides what you can see. And when the filter changes, the reality around seems to have changed. But in truth, you only stopped operating as one who waits and began to operate as one who has already arrived. The doors were always open. You just did not operate at the mental frequency that allowed recognizing them. Now you operate.